Hi, my name is Amanda Forsyth. I have chosen the topic of access to domestic violence shelters, and I'm focusing on the purchase area. I have decided to choose this topic based on the fact that I work in both critical care and emergency department. I care for patients regularly who are victims of this type of abuse. Unfortunately, this epidemic is far too common and it knows no boundaries. Anyone can be a victim, but not everyone will always reach out for help. The objectives of this presentation, you will have a better understanding of the changes that were made to House Bill 309 and its implications to the nursing profession. We'll be able to define domestic violence, have knowledge of the statistics involved with domestic violence, understand the need for additional access for the shelters in our local area, have a knowledge of the Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence and its 15 certified members, but it's actually 15 certified shelters across the state of Kentucky. And we'll be introducing to you the Merriman House and have basic knowledge of the services that they provide and their capital campaign. So first of all, what is domestic violence? As defined by Kentucky Attorney General Andy Beshear, he states that it's any types of acts committed by a current or former intimate partner against another or within a family. It can take the form of physical violence, sexual abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, financial abuse, or other controlling behaviors, which includes but is not limited to threats. And according to the CDC, 4.8 million women and 2.9 million men in our country are affected every year and suffer from the epidemic known as domestic violence. So it would be best if we obviously could completely eliminate domestic violence altogether, and we're getting there slowly but surely, especially with the new Me Too movements and all the different movements and people raising more awareness and the social media outlets and places like that. But until that is reached, we have to have resources available for the victims. Kentucky does offer some great resources for victims. The Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which is also known as KCADV. Like I mentioned earlier, they have the 15 certified shelters or safe havens throughout the state. And those offer emergent shelter for those in dire need. On my PowerPoint, I actually put up a map that it's actually made by the KCADV, and you can find it online as well. It actually shows the different areas of the state and breaks them down, and they're categorized by different colors, and it shows the name of the shelter drawn onto the map, and also phone numbers to be able to contact them. And there's also the crisis line numbers are listed, and then the National Domestic Violence Hotline is also listed on that. It's a great resource for people. So to talk about the shelter in our area, the Merriman House is actually located in Paducah, Kentucky, but it serves the whole Purchase Area Development District, and that is composed of Ballard, Callaway, Carlisle, Fulton, Graves, Hickman, Marshall, and McCracken counties in western Kentucky, so they serve quite a large area. It is actually funded, and they get federal and state grants for their funding. The KCADV, as well as the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, help fund them, and there's other private donations that are given and things of that nature. But there are several grants that they fill out. I actually spoke with Lisa Cockrell, who's their intake coordinator over there, and she gave me some really great information about different grants that they get and ways that they do fundraisers and things of that nature to raise money. Of course, there's never enough, really, when it comes down to it. They do take donations of goods, home goods and clothing and things like that for women and children. At this time, they only serve for women and children. They do not house men, so if it is a man in that situation, there's not a certified shelter for them in this area. I'm not sure about throughout the state. I feel like there's probably something out there. I do know that there is the homeless shelter in Paducah, but it's not necessarily just for domestic violence. But back to the Merriman House, they actually have a 24 bed, 24 emergent bed shelter. And you think, oh, 24 beds, that's a lot. But really, it's not a lot. I see that many in probably a month's time, different people who are victims of this kind of lifestyle. And I call it a lifestyle. It's really not, of this kind of, I mean, this abuse, this issue. Not everyone wants to leave the situation. And it's usually because of children, because that they don't think that they can survive on their own, and because there are waiting lists for these kind of things. So back to the Merriman House and what they offer. They've got it broken down on their website. You can go to the merrimanhouse.org, and they have it. There's their about page, and I mean, there's tons of useful information on there. And of course, they've got the crisis lines and everything else listed. But for life-saving services, they actually have the 24-hour crisis line. They have the 24-hour emergency shelter. They have a lethality assessment program. They do assistance with emergency protective orders. So they actually will assist the woman that's coming in to make sure that she gets the proper paperwork filled out for an actual EPO. It's very important that these victims get an EPO. It seems like it's just a piece of paper, but it's a piece of paper that will put their abuser in jail automatically. So it's a very important thing. They also have medical advocacy. They will take them to the emergency room. They'll come get them from the emergency room if need be. They have crisis counseling for adults and children. So, most people, the kids, that they see horrible things in these households. So it's important that they have therapy and have, counseling and help, reach out and be able to get that help. And they also offer relocation services for their victims. So they also have this thing, one branch is called Life Building Services. So they've got mental health support groups, comprehensive case management, psychoeducation, financial assistance, housing search and placement, financial literacy classes, economic empowerment classes, transportation is available. They give resource connections and referrals, and then again, children's services. So it's really important they get them in there, and it's not like they're just putting them up overnight. They're actually, helping these women find placement permanently and get signed up for assistance on their own so they can financially make it on their own, and getting them, they'll even go so far as working with them even after they've left the actual shelter and they're in, a placement somewhere, whether it be government housing or whatever, but they'll help them to see, hey, can we get you in school? Can we do something to better your situation? So, it's better for you and your children, and you don't ever have to go back to that situation. They offer life-changing services as well. And the housing case management, like I said, they'll take them from the shelter and they'll work on getting them placement out in the communities. The housing stabilization. They'll work with HUD. They'll work with all these different resources the government offers people. Because a lot of times these people, I hate to say it because it's not, domestic violence doesn't know any bounds, but it can be anybody from any kind of background or socioeconomic background for that matter. Oftentimes it's people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen to everyone, because it does. But back to this, they'll offer credit repair services, microloan programs and savings plans, ongoing case management and support. So they really help these women, get through the roughest part and kind of set back up with life again. So impacts on the nursing profession with this particular topic. As nurses, we care for victims of domestic violence in all settings. The majority may be seen in the emergency department or community health settings, like your health departments or just walk-in clinics, anything of that nature. I do know that I see more in the ER than I actually see coming up to the CCU and the ICU. The ones I do see come up to critical care, it's usually really bad. And if it's not directly because of the domestic abuse, it's oftentimes because of alcohol withdrawal, because of drug withdrawal, substance abuse. These people are put in terrible situations, and this is how they cope. And domestic violence is no longer a mandatory reporting issue for healthcare providers. That was the change that was made to House Bill 309, and it was done to help the victims of domestic violence. And I remember back when that first happened, and I thought, How is that helping the victims? We're not made to report this, but it makes sense with the more research I did on it. So as of June 29th, 2017, domestic violence laws changed regarding mandatory reporting. So House Bill 309 was largely backed by members of the KCADV and the National Coalition because multiple studies have shown that mandatory reporting actually caused more domestic issues within these homes. So before, when domestic violence was a reportable issue, it often left victims susceptible to increased violence from their abuser. So what would happen was, say they end up in the emergency department and we assess them. You do the screenings on everyone, and especially if they come in and they've actually been assaulted. And so you do the screening and they've been assaulted and it's by their partner. And we used to have to automatically report that to the authorities, just like child abuse or geriatric abuse. And so that doesn't mean that the person that did it's going to go to jail. And that's the sad part. So he or she doesn't go to jail. And this victim has to go back to this home because they oftentimes don't have, thank God, a reason to be admitted. But, we bandage them up, we fix whatever, cast them, whatever we need to do, get, x-rays and CTs, and then send them back to a home where someone has been contacted by police, but not necessarily arrested. And so then you're looking at worse abuse. I really had to think about that, and really think, actually it does happen more often than not that they don't always have to go to jail. And that's kind of sad, but that's the reality of it. And so it was scaring the people that were victims. They didn't want to seek medical assistance for things that needed to be seen, and they just didn't want to report it. Well, so finally these domestic violence advocates, really started doing these studies and really started looking into this and pushed for legislation to change, and it did, and it's actually helping the victims. And they've actually interviewed lots of victims since this has changed, and they are very glad that it's changed because they were threatened. They were being threatened by the abuser, and they were saying they were going to hurt not only them, but their families, their extended families, their pets. I mean, it was really bad. So the thing about House Bill 309, though, it did not change anything else about mandatory reporting of like child dependency, abuse, neglect, or vulnerable adult abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So, like I said, it is important to note that changes to House Bill 309 did not change mandatory reporting laws for child and or elder abuse. Nursing professionals will still screen all patients for potential abuse, and although domestic violence is now not reportable, resources and information, including asking the victim if they wish to contact the police or other authorities, is still mandatory under nursing policies and procedures in most all facilities. So always screen every patient for abuse. It's very important. So I've given you all this, and it seems like, hey, we've got the access, so what's the real problem here? And we are very fortunate to have the Merriman House in the Purchase Area District. The problem herein is the limited number of available emergent beds at the shelter. So like I said before, they have 24 beds, and like I said, the unfortunate truth is they all stay full all the time. There is always a waiting list, and I talked to, like I said, Lisa, their intake coordinator, and she said their list is forever long, and it's always long. And now they will work with other shelters within the state, and they can move people around and shuffle and do this and that, and as they're housing other people out in the communities, it opens up beds, but they are literally, they have to work around the clock to get this all to work out at all. And they do, and they use they utilize all the resources in the area to find the more permanent placement. So the biggest problem is when a victim reaches out for help, they almost always need shelter. Oftentimes these victims do not have adequate support, and so they really need a bed available for them and their children when they need this help. So on their website, they have their capital campaign, and it's where the Merriman House is wanting to expand. And it's like a huge campaign they have going on. So I reached out to Representative Will Coursey and asked if there was a way to make the fines and court costs for the people that are doing the abuse, if any of that could be appropriated towards the Merriman House, in our area, or if they could do that like statewide, nationwide. So in conclusion, it's like while Western Kentucky is very fortunate to have the Merriman House, it's obviously we need more availability of beds for our area. And in order to make that happen, we do have to all, as nurses, take a stand, reach out to legislation, ask that funds be appropriated specifically for that. And always, always, always let your patients know about the available resources in our area. If your facility does not have the information on hand, look it up. There should always be something somewhere on your intranet or paperwork, like per se in the ER settings, we usually have stacks of paper that's got all the available resources. Make sure that these people know about it. And that pretty much sums it up. Thank you.